Before we get into today's episode, and trust me, there is a lot to get into, I want to talk to you about your skin, which I know is a weird thing to come from this podcast, but you're stressed. You're reading the news, you're probably not sleeping great, and your skin knows it. I know mine does. Facial in a Bottle by Love Indus is a single product that does the work of a full professional facial at home in minutes. Clean ingredients, real results, no appointment required. Go to loveindus.com and use code MIMS25 for 21% off your first order. All right, let's get on with the show. It's Friday, March 6, 2026. Welcome to Make It Make Sense. I'm Grant Hermes. Today in the show, we are talking about money in politics. I know that the war in Iran is going on. I know that we just had some major breaking news when it comes to what immigration and counterintelligence and national security is going to look like with the firing of Kristi Noem. But we're also heading into what will be a very, very important midterm election. And the primaries have already started in some states, including Texas this week, where there were some huge elections. And that's why my guest this week is Tiffany Muller from End Citizens United. We talk about how and why there's so much money flowing through all of our politics right now, how that started, and how we can get our hands around reining some of that in, because it's better for all of us if we know where that money is coming from and how to police it. And before we get to that, make sure that you're following or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Leave a comment or a review. It really helps more people see the show. Sign up for the Make It Make Sense Substack. And as always, share the show on social media. It's Mims News Pod. That's MIMS News Pod. All one word on every platform. I am at Grant Hermes on Twitter and Blue Sky, and at Grant_Hermes on everything else. All right, let's get to my conversation with Tiffany Muller. Well, Tiffany, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Great to be here with you. Thanks for having me on.
I want to say first that I've been a fan of your work for a long time, so this is a real treat for me. And I want to start for the listeners then with a lay of the land of what money looks like as we head towards the midterms, because there's a lot of it. We are just awash in campaign money right now. So what is it like out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody listening and everybody across America agrees that there is too much money in politics. And, really the Supreme Court decision in Citizens United versus FEC really opened the floodgates to unlimited and undisclosed money and spending in our elections. And we have seen every single election cycle since then set new records, right?
Uh-huh.
And sadly, we know that right now in 2026, we are on track to set yet another new record for the most spending in both Senate races and House races.
Yeah.
So currently, Senate spending is projected to reach almost $3 billion in 2026, $2.8 billion for Senate races. And House spending is expected to reach $2.2 billion in 2026, actually crossing the $2 billion mark for the first time. And that is so much money. I mean, I think it's really hard for people to really understand how much money that is. But if we look back to 2008, the cycle before Citizens United was actually decided by the Supreme Court, there was only like $150 million of outside spending in our elections at that time, right? So we have gone from hundreds of millions of dollars to billions of dollars. And I think what it's done, and this is the part that matters most to people, is it has just further broken Congress. It makes it even less responsive to the people and more responsive to the people who can write the biggest checks. And it's left the American people just feeling like the whole thing is broken and that they are being left further and further behind.
Yeah, and listeners will remember some conversations that I've had with other guests where we've talked about how this level of money, because races become so expensive, it actually crowds, or not crowds up, but pushes probably better candidates out of races. And so not only does it lead to certain amounts of corruption, but it also prevents people who probably should be in office from getting into office. Before we go on, can you give me your best elevator explanation of Citizens United here?
Sure, absolutely. So Citizens United was decided in January 2010, and it was one of those really close 5-4 decisions in the Supreme Court, and really pushed by the conservative majority at that time. And it took two really terrible ideas and it merged them together. And it said corporations are people and money equals speech.
Mhm.
And it basically overturned 100 years of precedent. We had in place in our country about 100 years of saying that corporations couldn't spend unlimited money in our elections because we had seen what had happened when they were able to do that before, back in the Gilded Age, when monopolies were running our country and we had so much corruption. So we had 100 years of keeping that money out of our elections, and in one fell swoop, the Supreme Court overturned that 100 years of precedent and basically put a for sale sign on our elections. And what it allowed was not just corporations, but other really big spenders, special interest groups, billionaires, to begin to have just an outsized influence in our election, right? So now you see super PACs and other dark money groups that are now spending way more money in elections than even the candidates themselves are spending.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting element of what we've been seeing over the last 20 years or so, just about, I guess, if you can call it that, 25 or 15 years, let's call it, is that there is the explosion of money, like you were saying before. That's not, that's not inflation. $150 million to $5 billion is not, the price of the dollar or whatever. Are you seeing that there is just more money in this that is coming from more places that we just can't trace it? Or is the money coming from more concentrated places? So is it coming from fewer places that have more money, or is it starting to spread out? Or can we even know those things?
Yes is the answer to your
Yeah.
questions. Yes. Yes, there is more dark money. And when we say dark money, it means that you can't trace it back to its original source.
Yeah.
And the reason that that is important is because we as Americans, as voters, as constituents, need to know who's trying to influence an election so that we can kind of analyze the claims that they're making with that eye on, right? Like,
Yeah.
why are they engaging in this? Um, Prior to Citizens United, we could actually trace back about 75% of the outside spending in elections back to the original source, which means only about 25% could we not trace it back. That now number is now flipped. In outside spending, we can't trace 75% of the money back to its original source. That is really scary. It's also a national security problem. We have seen foreign governments interfere in our elections. We've seen foreign nationals interfere in our elections. But you also have just like corporations or billionaires who don't want you to know that they are playing in a certain race,
Right.
who are also trying to hide their money.
Right.
So the first answer, yes, there is more dark money, and it is a bigger and bigger problem every election cycle. Number two, yes, there is also a concentration of where money is coming from. So prior to Citizens United, billionaires giving in elections, I think they accounted for like 3 to 5% of the total money spent in elections.
Mhm.
That was billionaire spending. That has gone up to about 16% of the total spending in our elections, while also, as we were just talking about, the actual pure dollar amount has just skyrocketed,
Right.
right? We now in 2024 are the total amount spent in our elections was around $16 billion, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
So, the number has skyrocketed, but the percentage that is being made up by a small handful of folks has also really exploded. And
The thing that comes to my mind when you say that is the shot of the inauguration with
That's
all of
right.
the tech
That's exactly
billionaires
right.
standing there, right? That is that concentration of that wealth buying their way into that inauguration, but also giving a lot of money to the Trump campaign.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
And they did that because they expect a return on their investment, right? They weren't doing that just because they agree with Donald Trump's chaotic, corrupt administration.
Right.
They wanted things done. So either they wanted to make sure that investigations into their companies were dropped, regulations went the way that they wanted them to, that maybe they were going to push for laws or regulations that would help their bottom line. They wanted the big tax break that came about in the last reconciliation bill. There are lots of reasons and lots of things that they wanted from this government. And they viewed putting $1 million or even $100 million into the election as a good investment. And they are seeing that pay off in dividends,
Yeah.
right? The reconciliation bill, I think, is one of the greatest examples of this. That was a $5 trillion tax cut to big corporations and
Mhm.
billionaires at the expense of everyone else,
Right.
right? That's our money that we're giving to them when they have plenty of it. And our healthcare is being ripped away. Grocery prices are still going up. Housing prices are still going up. Childcare prices are still going up. These are policy choices. They want you to think things like this are inevitable, but that is not true.
When you see this sort of concentration of spending in this way, when you see the amount of money that we're putting into the campaigns in the way that we've been seeing, do you think of it as opening the door to having more brazen campaign finance violations, or just more brazen quid pro quo donations?
I think we're seeing it,
Yeah.
right? We are seeing it pay off in the most brazen way that we have ever seen in our country's history. I mean, the level of corruption is really at unprecedented levels. And I think we actually have now just kind of a pay to play corrupt government. And, Donald Trump's personal net worth has increased by somewhere between 3 to like $7 billion just since he got elected. And a lot of that is through things like his crypto
Okay.
scam and pieces like that, where he is actually shaking down foreign leaders, foreign governments, big donors, people who want pardons, and they are buying into his crypto meme scam, putting money into his pocket, and he's rewarding them with official government actions,
Hmm.
right? Or if you look at like the ballroom donors, he destroyed part of the White House to build this ballroom, which is estimated to cost at least $300 million. And if you look at the ballroom donors, the folks who have lined up to make donations to this, it is all people who then have had an official government action taken on their behalf.
Right.
Maybe a merger got approved. Maybe an investigation got dropped. Maybe a pardon went through. This is literally the price of entry into this government. And that is just antithetical to our American democracy, where you and I are supposed to have the same amount of voice and power as Elon Musk, right?
Right.
It is not supposed to matter how big your bank account is. It is supposed to matter that we are all American citizens with the power of our vote. And we are just seeing those guardrails just come off our democracy right now.
And that's money that we know about. That's
And that's
happening
money we know about.
right. That's happening outside of campaign season.
Yeah.
I actually think this is a good place to talk about the FEC, the Federal Elections Commission, which is supposed to oversee these campaign donations. They have a website that I use frequently that is not the most user friendly. So if I could wave a wand, I would start with fixing that. But the president, in waving his wand on these things, has attempted to overhaul the FEC to give him basically direct supervision and undermine the independence of this agency. For you, how dangerous is this?
Oh, it is. There is. I mean, look, there is currently no cop on the beat right?
Yeah.
They have been slowly decimating every campaign finance rule and law that we have on the books. But now we don't even have someone who can investigate and uphold the laws we still do have on the books. And that was very purposeful by this administration, because not only did they go after the Federal Election Commission, they went after inspectors generals in the federal agencies, which are also there to actually root out corruption and do these internal investigations. They've gone after other independent agencies, anyone who could be kind of a cop on the beat and who could root out corruption that could hold them accountable, they have just fired, right? And even when told they can't fire them, they are still just fired. So, look, the Federal Elections Commission needed reform already. It was dysfunctional and definitely not operating the way it was meant to when it was set up in the post Watergate era.
Mhm.
Um, However, now it is just non functional. They haven't had a functioning quorum in just about a year at this
Wow.
point. So they can't open investigations, they can't hold meetings, they can't do any official actions to actually move that agency forward. And, this is one of the things that we have to change. We have to get the right people in office who will then actually reform the agency and make it to where it can function again.
Right. And they're not functioning while we're seeing record
Oh,
amounts of
yeah.
money flowing into these elections, which has to compound this problem, right?
Absolutely. And now when we do finally get back to a place where they can function, the backlog is going to be so tremendous
Mm,
that, like, how do they even begin to start climbing out of that? And
right.
so I think this was done very purposefully, right? Again, if you know that you're going to do a whole lot of corrupt stuff around money and politics, you want to make sure that you remove any possible barriers to that. And the cops on the beat is one of them.
I think there's so much focus on what's happening with the Save America Act, and then
Mhm.
when they tried to pass the Save Act last time around, and what the president wants to do on the front end of elections in this, that there's so little focus on what happens on this side of it. Why do you think that is? I mean, I have my ideas about this, but you know, why do you think that is? And is that frustrating for you?
Well, I mean, I actually think that in many ways that what we're seeing is an attack on all the pillars of our democracy, right? So, yeah, of course, this administration is pushing the Save Act, which is not a a in any way designed to help people vote. It is designed to keep people from
Right.
voting, including 69 million women who have changed their name from the time they were born to when they got married,
Hmm.
and just trying to make it more difficult, just trying to create more obstacles. It is a voter suppression bill. Right. We have seen the kind of gerrymandering fights across the country. We are seeing the fact that there is more money than there ever has been, and more corruption than there ever has been. I think all in all, what you see across the board is just this sense of they clearly don't think that they are winning over the hearts and minds of the American people. And so the only way that they are going to be able to win elections is by cheating. I mean, that's really kind of what it comes down to. Otherwise, we could administer a free and fair election and the chips would fall where they may and let us debate the policies and priorities to the American people. That is not what we're seeing right now. And I think it's because they know that they're in real trouble with the
Mm.
American people. So they're going to try to cheat their way out of it, right? We saw them do it in Texas, and we're seeing them try to do this across the country. So that's what I think, is that they are just trying to look at all of this across the board and trying to figure out where they can cheat the system.
Is campaign finance one of the places that we can put guardrails back up and we can make elections more transparent and more fair again? Is that possible?
It is possible. And actually, it's possible with a simple vote of the majority in Congress. Now, to overturn Citizens United, it is a bigger climb. We need
Mm.
to either pass a constitutional amendment or we need to get the Supreme Court to overturn themselves. We need Supreme Court reform. Well, we should talk about that. But in the meantime, there's a lot we could do tomorrow with a simple vote in Congress. We could actually make sure the money spent in our elections is disclosed and transparent so that we could actually root out that corruption. We could incentivize small dollar donors instead of chasing the big money. We could stop super PACs and campaigns from coordinating. We could reform the Federal Elections Commission so we had a real cop on the beat. There's so much we could do tomorrow with a simple vote of Congress. But right now, that's being held up. And there are lots of good policy ideas in Congress, but right now it's being held up. And, stock trading ban, right? Like,
Mhm.
here's another one. Look, if you are a member of Congress, you should not be making money off of the insider information that you have from your position. You are there to serve the public, not line your own pockets. Or how about something simple like if you're a member of Congress, you shouldn't be able to become a lobbyist afterward, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
you shouldn't be worried about what your next job is going to be when, again, you're supposed to be serving the American people. All of these could be done with a simple vote by Congress.
Sure. Let's talk about Supreme Court reform then,
Love
since
it.
since you brought it up. When you say that, what do you mean? Do you mean expanding the court?
I mean, everything's on the table. But look, we need to start with ethics, recusal, transparency, and a gift ban. Right now, the Supreme Court is the only court in the nation that does not have an enforceable ethics code.
Good.
Instead, they say that they can enforce their own ethics. Well, we've seen how that works. You have Harlan Crow, a billionaire, splurging on these luxurious vacations to the tunes of half a million, millions of
Mhm.
dollars for folks like Clarence Thomas, and then doing things like buying him an RV or
Right.
buying his mother's house or paying for his kids' college. There is so much corruption happening with specific justices. And then those same folks have business in front of the court. And
Mhm.
those justices aren't recusing themselves, and there is no one to enforce that. So, first and foremost, there needs to be a gift ban in place. There needs to be a strong ethics code in place, and it needs to be enforceable by an outside independent entity. Okay. Just like every other judge and justice in the country is held to. So that's number one. Number two, we support term limits for Supreme Court justices. There's lots of different options out there, but I think the 18-year term limit is a good one to start with. And also hopefully that would take some of the dramatics out of these confirmation fights
Sure.
that we have seen. And then number three, yes, absolutely. Let's also look at expansion. The Supreme Court has changed in the size and scope multiple times before as our country has changed, and we should look at changing it again to be more responsive. The thing is, and the American people know this, the Supreme Court has actually been really influenced by these same dark money forces, right? And people are paying hundreds of millions of dollars to get their preferred Supreme Court justice confirmed, but they are also putting in hundreds of millions of dollars into these cases and into the web of briefs that go into these cases and the way that they are argued and the vacations that are being taken. We need to put a stop to all of that because the Supreme Court is the highest court in the land, and it is supposed to be our backstop in our search for fairness and justice. And right now, it is operating as another wing of a political party.
When you talk about term limits for justices, and I'm curious about this because I write a civics newsletter every week, and I know I told you I'm a nerd for this stuff, and I'm thinking about Article 3, in which it doesn't explicitly say that they're lifetime terms, but does say that they can't be removed unless they commit bad behavior, basically. Uh, how would that work? How would term limits work? Would that be a simple law? Would that need to be amending the Constitution? How would that happen?
I love this down in the weeds question. And I would like to start with saying I am not a constitutional lawyer. I am not a lawyer of any sort, which is fun for me. Um, but there there's a little bit of debate about this,
Mm,
right? Some folks feel like if the Term Limit Act is you get 18 years on the highest court, and then you actually go down to the appellate level and you do
sure,
the rest of the time you want to serve at the appellate level, that gets around that constitutional issue. Other
sure,
folks think that that it would be the Supreme Court interpreting this, and so therefore we'll need to go to a constitutional amendment for that part. Expansion and ethics and recusal and transparency and gift ban, none of that requires a constitutional amendment. So there are some debates about the exact mechanisms around the term limit piece, but that's what I know about it.
sure. The last thing I want to ask is, it doesn't feel like there's a ton of political will to change the damage that's been done by the Citizens United decision. And I think it's pretty fair to say that it was a damaging Supreme Court decision at this point. I think there's been a lot of, over the last 15 years, a lot of hemming and hawing about whether people can say that. I think we know by now there's just too much money in politics.
Yeah.
How can people who are regular voters voice their concerns? Because it doesn't seem like the people that they elect to office would want to bite the hand that feeds.
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing that I think people need to understand. The only thing more powerful than money in politics is the people in our politics. And so the more and more that we send the message that we are going to reward candidates who are pushing for reform, who's fighting to change the broken system, the more that they will be responsive to that. And so, first of all, I think that we saw a wave of reformers elected in 2018, and that had a direct outcome to then the policies that were pushed in the next congressional session. HR 1, which kind of signifies the
Mhm.
top agenda item, was the largest comprehensive democracy reform bill that we've seen in generations. It included voting rights, money in politics, ethics reform, and ending gerrymandering. And it passed the House, but it died in Mitch McConnell's Senate at the
Mhm.
time. But then just a couple of years later, when we had the trifecta, we came extremely close to actually passing that into law. It passed the House 5 times. It had every member of the Democratic Senate caucus on it as a co-sponsor, but we came up just short of being able to get past the filibuster on
Yeah.
that, right? But it remains a top tier agenda item for the Democratic Party. That's great. We need to keep that pressure up. So everybody who's watching, like, we need you to ask your members of Congress whether or not they're prioritizing this, and tell them to. We need you to go to town halls or send an email and make sure that you are holding them to account on these issues. The more they hear about it, I mean, they literally will keep track of what they are hearing about every week from people in their district. The more that they hear about it, the more that they will continue to make it a priority. And so I think that the system is really broken. I think that right now the two parties are not equal in what they want to do on it. But I think what continues to give people more power is by holding those members and those candidates' feet to the fire and letting them know that there will be a price to pay for being against these things at the ballot box.
Perfect. Well, Tiffany, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
This was so much fun. Thanks for having me on.
I want to thank Tiffany again for coming on the show. You can find a link to her work at End Citizens United in the show notes. And that's it for today's episode. Please rate and review wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe to the Make It Make Sense Substack. And as always, share the show on social media. It's Mims Newspod. That's MIMS Newspod. All one word on every platform. I am at Grant Hermes on Twitter and Blue Sky, and at Grant_Hermes on everything else. Thank you so much for listening today. I'm Grant Hermes, and I'll talk to you next week.